Well, well, well. Look who suddenly became the issue they are unable to resolve, the factor they failed to consider, and the name that transformed a boardroom into a combat zone. Welcome back. Or perhaps I should say welcome to the moment when everything changed. Because individuals you thought understood you simply learned they don't know you at all, somewhere in a room you've never seen. Someone simply got up, pushed back their chair, looked around the table with real terror in their eyes, and uttered the words that altered everything. Everything needs to be reconsidered. And the hush that ensued was about you. Shall we paint the picture correctly? Anxious expressions are reflected in the polished wood of the meeting table. Your name appears on a projector screen. Perhaps your recent actions, your performance indicators, or simply your being in their environment. Some folks assumed that this meeting would be standard, a brief conversation, or a straightforward strategy session. However, someone then made a statement. Perhaps it was your effect, your numbers, or the knowledge that all of their presumptions about you were incorrect. The temperature in the room abruptly fell. Notebooks abruptly closed. The individual who believed they had all the answers abruptly stood up and acknowledged they didn't. Everything needs to be reconsidered. 5 basic words. However, those 5 words were a white flag, a surrender, and an acknowledgement that their whole framework for comprehending you simply fell apart in that room because you became unpredictable and their methods were based on predictions. You shattered the pattern that guided their actions. They believed they had you controlled, mapped, and categorized, but you did something unexpected. While they were busy making plans, you changed. While others were still clantered much project, you turned into the solution to a query they weren't even aware they needed to ask, and right now, they're scrambling now. The self-assured ones now appear perplexed. The decision makers now appear to be immobilized. Those who grinned at you last week are now wondering if it may cost them something in the future. Because this was not how this meeting was intended to conclude. It was meant to conclude with direction and clarity, with everyone nodding in agreement on how to deal with you. Rather, it ended in mayhem. Someone left in the end. It concluded with the understanding that you are not a problem that they can resolve using their normal operating processes, tools, and comforting presumptions. Do you want to know what set it off? It wasn't just one thing. It was the buildup. It was the way you've been acting, thinking, and seeming differently. They were unable to overlook the outcomes. They had little control over the reputation that began to grow. It was the discussions about you taking place in uninvited rooms. It was the abrupt realization that the world was viewing you from a different perspective than they were, and their perspective was incorrect, totally, shamefully, disastrously incorrect. And at last, someone in that room had the guts or the confidence to speak it aloud. This is what you must comprehend. The purpose of that meeting was to contain you, manage you, and anticipate your next move so they could oppose it. However, the script changed in the middle. All of a sudden, it was no longer about you. It was about them, their errors in judgment, their antiquated tactics, and the discrepancy between your true self and their perception of you. And that disparity is enormous. They suddenly realized they can't cross that gap, which is a canyon, because it felt riskier to sit in that room appearing to have answers than to acknowledge they didn't. Someone got up. Everything needs to be revisited. Give that some thought. Everything. Everything. Not just their strategy, nor just their methods. Their entire view of you, their presumptions about your boundaries, their forecasts of your future, their comprehension of your motivations, and their conviction that they could read, control, and outwit you. Everything was broken. You didn't have to say a thing, which is the lovely poetic justice of this moment. It was not necessary for you to defend yourself. There was nothing for you to prove. An entire room was silenced by the loudness of your act's outcomes in progress. Here, consider the timeline. You were the subject of casual chat a few weeks or perhaps months ago, simple to ignore, simple to undervalue, easy to put away as unimportant or unthreatening, or we are well aware of their nature. They put you in a box that was tidy, cozy, and predictable. They periodically checked that box, gave a satisfied nod, then turned their issues. However, the box began to shake at some point, but they chose to ignore it. They made excuses when the box began to crack. They are now standing in the rubble, staring at one another and wondering how this happened when the box detonated. You took place. That's how. You declined to remain in their story. You declined to act out the part they gave you. You didn't want to be the person their spreadsheet said you would be. And you had already advanced 3 steps each time they attempted to modify their models to take you into consideration. You added a new variable each time they believed they had deciphered your pattern. You did something completely different each time they prepared an answer to what they anticipated you would do. And now, after all of that, after all of their planning, analysis, and preparation, they're back at square one worse than before, since they now realize their instruments are ineffective. It's possible that the individual who left was the most intelligent person present, because remaining in the meeting would have required them to continue acting as though they had control. It would entail complying while everyone else develops fresh tactics based on the same flawed framework. It would include cooperation in the delusion that they are still able to control, foresee, and fit you into their frameworks. Additionally, some people leave because they can no longer cooperate after realizing the reality. They leave. And the loudest statement in the room is their departure. Let's discuss those who stayed. Nevertheless, those who are still sitting there gazing at their notes are attempting to salvage something from this catastrophe. They are now the ones who pose a threat. They act recklessly because they are desperate, not because they are intelligent or have a plan. They will attempt to accelerate timetables. They will attempt to coerce you into responding. They have ran out of ways to guess your approach, so they will attempt to prod you into disclosing it. To regain control, they need you to make a mistake. They want you to fall, so they can say, "See, we knew it all along." This is the reality that is keeping them awake this evening. You're not making You're taking action, purposeful, methodical, and patient actions. Additionally, a move fulfills your aim rather than theirs, which distinguishes it from a mistake. You reacted whenever they anticipated you would. You moved forward each time they expected you to defend. You grew every time they thought you would shrink. Additionally, they have been so preoccupied with finding your flaws that they have entirely overlooked your positives. Because the game has evolved and they are still operating under outdated rules, they are now sitting in meetings and reconsidering everything. You know what's actually bothering them. They weren't merely mistaken. It's that they made mistakes in public. It wasn't a private meeting. No one whispered those words. It was an uncontained moment of collective understanding. It was observed by others. It was heard by others. Other individuals are now aware that the decision makers, strategists, and specialists were mistaken. And it's not only embarrassing in their world to be mistaken about something this important. It will change your career. It damages one's reputation. It's the kind of thing that causes others to doubt all of their other statements and forecasts. Indeed, someone left with the statement, "We need to rethink everything." However, the true translation is, we underestimated them. We misread them. We built our entire strategy on a version of them that doesn't exist, and now we're exposed. The true fear is that, because reconsidering everything entails acknowledging that everything was incorrect up to this point, and for those who base their identities on being correct, ahead of the curve and in charge, acknowledging their mistakes shatters a core aspect of who they are. Their confidence is shattered. Their authority is compromised. They start to doubt themselves as well as you. This is where it becomes exquisitely ironic. You don't need to reconsider anything about yourself when they are preoccupied with reconsidering everything about you. You are aware of who you are. You are aware of your potential. You are aware of your destination. You don't have to deal with their perplexity. You are not responsible for their crisis. It is their burden, not yours, to classify, comprehend, and forecast you. You are no longer constrained by their expectations, frameworks, or need to fit in the boxes that were never big enough for you in the first place. It wasn't just about you, it was about them. So let's examine what the meeting indicated in more detail. About their methods, their shortcomings, and the reality that their whole method of comprehending people is faulty. They depend on information, trends, and past performance. When interacting with predictable individuals, all the way towards blah. You, however, are unpredictable. You're flexible, you're changing. You are a person who develops, learns, and changes. Additionally, their systems are unable to take transformation into consideration. Evolution cannot be predicted by their models. Someone who refuses to be the same person twice cannot be contained by their tactics. Therefore, when someone remarked, "We need to rethink everything," they were actually facing their own limitations. They were acknowledging that the methods they used, the frameworks they trusted, and the instruments they relied on didn't work on you. What else are they mistaken about if they don't work on you? They have underestimated who else? What other chances did they overlook because they were too preoccupied with classifying people? That's the true instability that resulted from the meeting, not just uncertainty about everything. And you're curious about the most fulfilling aspect? It wasn't your intention to disrupt their systems. You didn't try to disprove them when you woke up. You were simply being who you are, developing, learning, changing, going for your objectives, and enjoying your life. And in some way, you were the variable that disrupted their equations simply by being who you truly and unabashedly are. You turned into the case study that disproved their hypotheses, turned into the illustration of their lack of knowledge. It wasn't because you tried, but rather because you didn't live inside the constraints they attempted to place on you. This is where things get really intriguing, so let's discuss what comes next. They will make an effort to research you more thoroughly. They will look for fresh patterns. They will hold more meetings, perform more analysis, and gather more data. And they aren't getting any stronger as a result of all that work, energy, and attention to you. Every hour they spend attempting to understand you is an hour they are not devoting to their own development, which is weakening them. By the time they put it into practice, every tactic they devise to contain you is already out of date. They base all of their predictions on your past, not your future, and you're moving while they're immobilized by analysis. You're putting your plan into action while they're discussing theirs. You're developing everything while they're reconsidering everything. Instead of becoming closer, the distance between you and them is growing. They sense it as well. The meeting ended in pandemonium because of this. Someone left because of this. Because they could see the momentum changing, those who stayed appeared shaken. They are able to detect a loss of control. They are not in charge of deciding your course in the future, even though they can see it taking shape. You are. This is what they will never comprehend. They don't compete with you. You're not their competitor. They're playing a different game than you are. They are thinking 3 moves ahead while they move pieces in a game of chess. You're engaging in a completely new game, one for which they have no regulations, one for which they lack strategies. They don't even know how to keep score, so they can't win. And a pandemonium is caused by that dissonance, that basic mismatch in comprehension. It causes them to reconsider everything. Their talks about you become sessions about their own inadequacy because of this. Since fear is the true emotion causing that pandemonium, let's deal with it. Instead of being terrified of you personally, they are afraid of what you stand for. You stand for the potential that their entire worldview is incorrect, that their tactics are out of date, that their power is brittle, and that their control is a delusion. You stand for development they can't contain, success they can't explain, and change they can't explain, and change they can't control. Additionally, someone like you becomes an existential threat when people base their entire identity on being the ones who control, contain, and explain. This is not because you are a threat to them. Rather, it is because your presence challenges all of their beliefs about how the world functions. They met as a result. They made an effort to address your issue. Someone recognized you're not the issue halfway through. The issue is their unwillingness to acknowledge that people can surpass their expectations. The issue is their desire to control outcomes over which they have no authority. The issue is their presumption that everyone follows the same playbook. Walking out was the only sincere course of action when that awareness struck, and the true issue became apparent, because repairing the wrong thing won't solve a problem. When your entire premise is faulty, you are unable to reconsider your approach. And now, no matter where you are or what you're doing, you're living rent-free in their minds. Not because you're trying to, not because you care, but because they've made you the focal point of their meetings, strategies, and concerns. They elevated you to that position. You have that power because of them. They are unable to undo it now. Every choice they make will make them wonder, how will this person respond? Every tactic they use will make them wonder, will this work on someone this unpredictable? Every action they take will make them second guess. Are we still underestimating them? That's the true victory here. Not that you won a battle or proved anything, but that by just existing, being yourself, and following your own path, you became the benchmark by which they measure their own efficacy. You were used as a test case to see if their tactics were effective. You turn into the standard that highlights their shortcomings, and they treated you like that. You were given that role by them. That dynamic was their creation. They are now dealing with the fallout from making you more significant than you ever requested. This is your crown, shaped by their fear, polished by their panic, and carried by their confusion. They desired to comprehend you. They sought to foresee. The goal was to subjugate you, and in the process they disclosed nothing about you and everything about themselves, because you continue to exist as you always have, beautifully, fiercely, and unquestionably beyond their comprehension. After the meeting, someone said they needed to reconsider everything. However, you don't have to reconsider anything. All you have to do is continue to be yourself, unfiltered, unstoppable, and unrepent exactly what they can't handle. Your story is just getting started, but the meeting ended in turmoil, and this time you are the storyteller rather than the topic of the gathering. The class is dismissed.